Hey friends, thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation that I had with Elizabeth Blackstock. Last year, I had the opportunity to interview F1 journalist Elizabeth Blackstock, where we discussed American interest in Formula One, the opportunities and challenges. We have similarities in our journeys, and I believe you'll appreciate hearing her analysis as much as I have enjoyed reading her work over the years. Apologies for the audio. We experienced technical challenges while recording. But before we get to our conversation, I need to ask, can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Wow, I'm excited. It's like something that I've been looking forward to actually for quite some time is the guest that we have, which is Elizabeth Blackstock. Elizabeth, you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. That's really kind of you to say. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I mean it. Because here's the thing, Elizabeth, and I will give just a tidbit, is you're a person who has written in various publications for the world of Formula One. And every time I've read your articles, I've just walked away going, yeah, I really like her analysis. I think her commentary is very insightful. So the fact that you accepted this invitation to have this conversation, now the guys couldn't join us, so it's going to be just 2 girls, but I think that's awesome. And I know they support
Say girl power.
exactly. And I mean, that's part of the joy of what we're doing is that we all feel confident in our team and what we're doing and also as individuals. And so I know that they're both bummed that they couldn't be a part of this conversation, but they said keep going. So all that said, Elizabeth, I'd like you to introduce yourself to the audience, if you don't mind.
My name is Elizabeth Blackstock. I am currently the U.S. editor at planetf1.com, but I also have a podcast called Deadly Passions, Terrible Joys about motorsport history. Do a live stream with my best friend, Ashley Andelay, about all things race car. I published a book called Racing with Rich Energy with my co-author, Elena King, which really dug into the scandal and the drama and the chaos of the Rich energy drink sponsor that Haas had for a couple months in 2019. So yeah, I'm just a little bit all over the place doing as much as I humanly can.
Well, so that's a lot, like you just said, and it's interesting to do it. But tell me and tell the audience, please, how did you get into the world of motorsport? And I should note, you are an American, correct? Like you're in the U.S.
Born and raised.
Okay, and then has your focus been in the world of Formula One or motorsport in general that's narrowed in recent years towards the more Formula One focus?
So I grew up in Michigan. So my whole family was part of the auto industry, basically. So I grew up around cars. We grew up with NASCAR. We watched it for a couple of years while I was growing up, but my brother had his birthday party and we had NASCAR on the day Dale Earnhardt died. My mom turned the TV off and she was like, we're done with this. No more. And then as I got older, I was like, it's not cool to like what my parents liked. 2013 came around, saw the movie Rush because I was a massive Chris Hemsworth fan. And I also just loved the 1970s kind of in general. And I could not stop thinking about it. Like the whole way home after I saw that movie, I was like, there is no way that any of this is real. They had to make this up. This is Hollywood. Like they've it's all exaggerated. Went home, dug in, and I was like, oh no, the real story is so much crazier. There's so much, they pared it down to fit it into a 2-hour film. And from that point on, I was obsessed. I was, in high school at that time, about to graduate, really got into kind of the history and nitty gritty of Formula One, just learning about the 70s, and then realized, okay, well, this thing still happens. So I should watch a race. I believe my first race was Korea in 2013. I pulled an all-nighter for that one, had an absolute blast, and then found some friends on Tumblr. And I was like, hey, I'm moving to Austin for college. I'm going to go to the University of Texas. There's a racetrack there. So I asked my mom as a graduation present, could I get tickets to the Formula One race? Thinking I'm going to go and I'm going to get it out of my system. She bought me 2 tickets and I invited a friend to come down. But in the preliminary build up to all of it, I was going absolutely crazy. Red Bull had a contest where you could design a poster to meet Daniel Ricciardo. So I designed 7 and sent them from different email addresses because I was like, I want to do this. I was painting banners. I was 150% committed to this. Went to the race. had such a good time. And my friend and I went back to my apartment afterward, and she was like, "So we're going to Europe next year, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think we're going to Europe next year." So we did, and it was kind of just a snowball from there. When I was in college, I realized I could write about this. And Formula One was just always, there's so much history, there's so much drama, there's kind of, it's a little exotic in the sense that, like, Americans, we aren't used to that. It's not quite as familiar as something like NASCAR, IndyCar, and just being the person that can explain this to Americans and to also, in return, explain American culture to, the Europeans and British audiences has been like an absolute dream come true.
I knew I liked you, Elizabeth. Now I like you even more. This is amazing. Well, so it sounds like very much the time that actually I was connecting deeper into the sport is
Mhm.
around the same time that you are. Very different story. And so, like, I'm sitting here thinking about you're coming to Austin. Coda is just really
Mhm.
just starting its story in Texas and in the United
Yes.
States. And like, wow, how awesome for
Yeah.
you. Like, it's almost like you parallel the story of Coda and
Mhm.
your own trajectory of coming into your own into the world of Formula One.
Yeah, it's been very, very cool because, I mean, the first year that I went to COTA was 2014. I think it's the second year that they had the Grand
Mhm.
Prix there. A third, I think, actually total. And then, like, there was no one there. We had the run of the place, especially on
Right.
third or on Friday. There was me, my friend Remy. We were just kind of there and we could sit anywhere, we could go anywhere. I took my husband for his first ever Formula One Friday this year, and I was like, "This is just crazy how many people there are just packed in here trying to get a seat and get a view." It's so cool to have seen how much that's grown since then. It's
Mhm.
oh my god, it's a complete 180. And I felt like I kind of got in at the right time just because I was there as it was starting to kind of skyrocket, and it worked out, like, at the perfect point as well for where I was like, I knew I wanted to be a writer. I didn't quite know what I was gonna write about or what kind of writer I wanted to be, and this motorsports thing kind of came into my life at this point where I was like, I'm defining myself and I wanna write about this. This is the thing I care about, and it was just, I don't know, just perfect harmony.
And so you don't come from a STEM background.
No, I am creative writing major in college, and I went to grad school and did a dual degree in English literature and creative writing.
Okay. And you said your family comes from an automotive background, but I didn't hear you say anybody coming from a racing background. Do
Nope,
you have any racing? No. Okay.
no
So does
reason.
that sense you and I are very similar because I'm a non-STEM, I'm a non-racer. I come from more like the legal and the relational and the creative side is much more what
Mhm.
I'm comfortable with. Like I always joke
Yeah,
and say, my only sport that I pay attention to is Formula One.
I am in the
And
exact same boat.
oh, wow. So no wonder your writing has really resonated with me because I think that I've appreciated the intellectual approach with which you've come at it, but also,
Mhm.
as you noted, the history. The history of the sport has really pulled me in and understanding the cast of characters that the sport has
Yes.
seen. So, like, even talking about your rich energy, I'm like, oh, I got to go find that book now. I had no idea Elizabeth wrote that
Ugh.
book. So let's move on, like, really into some of the hot topics then, because I feel like you have a lot of opinions that I think very well thought out.
Mhm.
And it is unfortunate the guys can't be here because of the longevity that they've had with the sport.
Mhm.
Having been racers, having watched, I always joke and say you guys were the cool kids long before it was cool. And they remember the era of Niki Lauda. They remember
It's
all
so
the people.
cool.
I know. I tell them all the time, like, I'm so jealous, that you guys were paying attention to this, and it's your formative years of the sport is watching Senna, or Dick is a huge fan of Jackie Stewart, and John is Gilles Villeneuve. And so, like, to
Mhm.
me, when I sit and listen to them and when they talk about the different races they attended, and so we'll just have to say this will be a part one, and
I was
that
gonna say, I gotta come back. I gotta liaise with the fellas.
definitely, definitely, because I feel like right now it's the audience is probably like, okay, girls, get going, get talking. So let's talk a little bit about Americans in Formula One. Why do you think we're not seeing more Americans on the Formula One grid? Here's where this question comes from, and you
Mhm.
probably see this in your perch as a writer,
Mm-hmm.
every time we have a Grand Prix, I feel like all of a sudden the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, everybody all of a sudden pays attention to Formula One and then says,
Mm-hmm.
why do we not have Americans? I'm like, well, where have you all been all year long? And who's paying attention to this? So I wonder what your thoughts are about why we don't see Americans on the Formula One grid right now, or the pipeline.
The pipeline itself is very strange and unique. So this year, I really kind of wanted to take a deeper focus into that and talk to Max Esterson and Jack Crawford, who are both on the ladder as Americans up into Formula One. Because I was like, well, we have the IndyCar feeder series that leads up to IndyCar, obviously. But what is the value of jumping ship, essentially, and going over to Europe? And their answer was compelling, where in Europe and in England, there is a much higher concentration of racetracks and people affiliated in racing compared to the United States, which means that you can go to a racetrack, rent a car for fairly cheap, and learn how to race without a huge investment or a huge amount of travel. So here in the United States, unless you're actually living near a race circuit, like we have some absolutely fantastic venues, but they're not the like club tracks that you have out in England. They're not the ones that you can, do an ample amount of testing on. So it puts the American drivers on a slightly different playing field. They have to then commit to go over to Europe, which again is a huge financial commitment. Talking to Max Esterson and Jack Crawford, they were making these decisions in their teens. They had to have families who were in a position to make that happen. They had to have, COVID hit perfectly for both of them in a way that they were able to go do their schooling. Instead, they could continue with the U.S. schooling system while racing in England. We just don't quite have the same robust infrastructure in the United States that facilitates those young drivers kind of making it to the top in Formula One. And then when they get there, they're not quite as familiar with the racetracks, the style of racing, the style of car. This goes for almost anything. The drivers from China, the drivers from Japan, the drivers from Australia, they all have to make those same commitments. They just have a slightly larger, I think, legacy within Formula One, if only in the sense that America has its own defined traditions in racing, where it's like if you're a race car driver here, you can have a great career, in like 3 different series if you wanted to, and you're set. You don't have to go over to Formula One, where I think for everyone else, that is the pinnacle. And I think America is only kind of starting to take that as gospel, that Formula One is in fact the pinnacle of auto racing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I know the guys would agree with you as well. We actually had Jack on the show. Love
Great
him.
guy.
Yes, he is. He's such a great, we're constantly cheering him on. And we even this week's race, or I don't know when this is going to air, but even the last race of the season, it was just unfortunate that lap, I think it was lap 4 where he got out, but it was sad for the end of the race, but he had a really good year and we're really excited to see. We would love to have Max on the show at some point. That would be great. And so I do agree with you, the assessment and the feedback you've received from them. And we've heard that also from other aspiring American drivers, that it's such a challenge. And especially when you consider the age when these racers have to make these choices, where
Imagine being 12 years old and deciding what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And that decision involves picking up and moving to a completely different country, completely different continent. That's wild. That's a crazy thing to ask of anybody. And a lot of these guys are making this call, but it's a lot easier if you're just like growing up in France. You can bop over to England if you wanted to race there. That's not quite as big of a deal. You can still live at home. Here in the States, you can't make that commute just for the heck of it. That would be crazy.
Right. Well, and especially the value proposition would be, if you're going to commit to developing your racecraft, why not do it here local in the United States, like a weekend trip up to Mid-Ohio? That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But like that's the equivalent of someone living in France going and doing a weekend trip and getting in their trailer and just going. And so, yeah, we agree with you on that. I wonder then, because part of it is people are noticing that question, and even the way that I framed it, right? Of when we have a Grand Prix, then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, do you think that part of this American expansion might change that paradigm a little bit, make it easier? Do you think that the expansion that Formula One has made into the United States, and especially through Drive to Survive, allows for a bridge? Or do you think that it's going to take a lot of steps, and or there's no no desire for people to make that leap and start creating that pipeline?
I think that there's definitely there's always kind of been a desire, but I think the desire has always been limited by visibility. If you don't see Formula One as a potential or an option, you don't know that you can aspire to it or make the commitment to go to that. We're starting to see, a lot of Americans learning about what this is for the very first time. Kind of, if they knew about Formula One, now they're fans of Formula One. So there's been this kind of big transition. I think there will still be a lot of steps forward. This is the stuff, even with, I think I can liken this to kind of women getting involved in racing. You have to start down at the very grassroots level of the local go-kart track these kids are racing on and give them the sense that you can make it to the top or you can keep on pushing through. It might not be easy, but you can get there if you keep trying. I mean, there's obviously interest in having an American Formula One driver. We talk about it all the freaking time. Logan Sargent, I'm sorry, he wasn't I think the star we would have wanted him to be, and that's why we kind of keep pushing for someone else, someone who, even with Haas, we've got an American team that doesn't really feel like an American team. So it's really cool that Cadillac is coming in because that's going to be, our stars and stripes kind of our team. I think we're definitely going to see improvements in that front, but I think it's definitely going to take a little while because the kids who are growing up right now in karting are the ones who are going to be in the next few years making the commitment to go overseas. And they've still got a couple of steps to go up that ladder.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's a generation at least before we start to see that. And that maybe this moment with Drive to Survive being a catalyst of interest and with Liberty being an American-based company and seeing the value of sustaining that interest and maybe through other vehicles outside of the actual races in the Grand Prix. I wonder what your thoughts are about Drive to Survive because like me, you didn't come in that door, but I think when people realize that you're a quote newer fan, especially when they see that you're a woman, I feel like people think, oh, the only reason why you like this is because the drivers are handsome. I'm like, I mean, that doesn't hurt, but that's
that's like the cherry on top. The rest of the cake is still real good.
Exactly. So I wonder what your thoughts are about that.
I honestly, I'm like a huge Drive to Survive fan and also critic. Like every time I watch a season, the first time I watch it, I'm like, that didn't happen that way. That wasn't like that. That radio message wasn't at that race. And then I get all my grumps out about it. And then like 2 months later, I go back and watch it again. And I'm like, oh, this rips. This is so cool. Like, this is so great. For sheer, like, getting people in the door. What a great series. Yes, it is a crafted storyline. Yes, there are things left out. Yes, there are things I wish they would cover, but also this is Formula One and they have an agenda and you kind of have to accept that the way that they want to be portrayed is the way they're going to portray themselves. I think it's great. Like I could only have wished for something like this when I was first getting into Formula One in 2013. I'm watching documentaries like Senna, kind of the old ones about the drivers in the 70s. And I was like, this is great. I don't know the guys on the grid. I don't know any of these people. And that was in the throes of Bernie Ecclestone's lockdown on anyone having any semblance of personality. So it was even tougher to like kind of get to know who these people are. It's such a great gateway. You don't have to understand everything about Formula One, but I've always found that when you have an in, and it's either that's, Drive to Survive as a whole, or just like, hey, I liked that guy on that show, you've got something that you can connect into the live broadcast that makes you say, I care about this, and I'm watching this, and I'm paying attention to this. The rest of it will come afterward. You'll get that. You'll learn that through exposure. I think it's great for me. Obviously, like I get to work in Formula One. I am an asset now in the sense that I am located in the United States and we have a lot of races going on here and the British don't want to send all their people over here all the time. So like perfect in, but I think it's just kind of like magic. I still feel like a kid at Christmas sometimes when I go outside and I'm like just shopping. I'm like, oh my God, there's a McLaren shirt. So people in my town know who McLaren are. That's crazy. I couldn't have imagined anything like that when I was younger.
When you talk about a McLaren shirt, I was accompanying my mom to a doctor's appointment and we're literally walking through the door and then this guy walks past us and he's wearing a Mercedes shirt. And I went, I stopped and I said, are you a Russell or a Hamilton fan? And the guy goes, you know this? I said, yes, I do. And then of course I had to tell him about the podcast. And then the other one, this is hilarious. And like John and Dick know this. I am so shameless. I'm driving down my street, and I guess we got new neighbors. All of a sudden, I see this guy, and he's wearing a Red Bull shirt. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wearing a Red Bull shirt. I slam on the brakes, roll down the mirror, and I go, "Are you Verstappen or are you Perez?" Turned out he was Perez. And I said, "Great." I said, "Okay, here's my podcast." And I said,
That's so
and it was like, I think it was like a Saturday too. I said, "Did you watch Quali?" He goes, "Not yet." I said, "Then I will not tell you what happened." It was so fun. I mean, like, you do kind of feel like, oh, there's a community that's building. I guess the question that all of that leads to is, do you think this is sustainable? I guess the reason why I asked that is because a lot of people's attention, unlike the two of us, came in during the time of COVID where they were cloistered away. And now you have life and you have a lot of pressures. There's a lot more stuff. And even something as simple as it's so expensive and inflation and all these other things are pushing on people's budgets. Are they really able to sustain this passion and joy that they've received? Do you think that we will continue to see the American market thrive?
That's such a tough question because every year at the end of the season, I always do like a little debrief. And it's like, if you're an American fan, reach out. What did you think? How do you feel? Did you feel welcome? Did you feel like this was accessible, et cetera, et cetera? And I get the same feedback, I think, all the time where it's like, it's too dang expensive. It's hard to get to these places. It's unreasonable hours in some cases, like Las Vegas. I think we are in a good, probably plateau, at least for a little while, where we're going to hold this similar level of attention. Just because we've had a really good 2024 season. The people who got into Drive to Survive and into Formula One during the COVID era, those were people who got invested in the drama that was being produced on television. And they saw that reenacted live in 2021 when they watched probably what was their first season. They had the Verstappen and Hamilton battles. You would, wake up on a Sunday and you'd have no idea what was about to happen, but you were stoked no matter what. We didn't have that in 2023. It was boring as hell. A lot of people tuned out, and they had a right to. And I'm never going to fault anyone for not sitting through the Verstappen domination show. But when they came out this year, I think you got the benefit of like, this is what the sport is. Sometimes it's a sport of dynasties, and sometimes we see the changing of the guard. And you stick around for these times when you see the baton get passed, where, you watch one historic occasion change into another. That's freaking cool. That's one of the things I've enjoyed the most about this. Even when I was, watching Lewis Hamilton win everything, it was still like, I want to cherish it because I know it's going to end. And then it did end. And now I'm like, oh, Verstappen, it's cool that he's been so dominant. It's cool to see, especially his progression as a driver and his growth, all of that stuff. We're, moving into a new era, maybe a McLaren era. It's giving people something more to look into and look forward to, especially because you are waking up at 8 a.m. or earlier on a Sunday. If you're going to put that kind of commitment into something, you would like to have some enjoyment that comes out of it. And so watching someone win by 30 seconds is generally not that. I think we're kind of at a choice point, if you will, with what Formula One has become here in the United States. I think largely because, we've gotten to this point where we have this interested audience, this core of dedicated fans that have either just gotten into it or have continued to be interested in Formula One, who are trying to take that to the next step. And that next step is going to a racetrack, buying merch, going to events, meeting up with friends. A lot of that stuff is unattainable still. I would love so much more Formula One merch. I cannot afford it. I say it all the time. If I wasn't a journalist, I wouldn't be going to races because I can't afford it. It took my husband this year to Friday at COTA. We could only do Friday because that was the only reasonably priced ticket option available. That's a huge issue. And especially with Las Vegas, there were empty grandstands again this year. Drastic price slashing into the weeks leading up to the race in hopes of selling tickets. That's not a good look. That's not sustainable. And I don't know, it's just the PR of it is just so bad too. If you're not being able to draw fans to this high dollar event, I think a lot of the American fans are feeling like, oh, they just want my money. They just kind of want the consumer aspect of this. And then if that dries up, then they'll wash our hands of us and they don't have any investment beyond that. And that's unfortunate. That is kind of been the story of Formula One in America since it first started. There's always been a misunderstanding of the American audience, and that has always led to clashes or problems or even just scheduling issues. Who's putting a race in Dallas in July? Only the craziest humans alive.
Yeah, actually, John and Dick, I think, were there at that race, and it's how stories of that.
Must have been miserable.
I know. And I agree. I think John sent me an article, or maybe I ran across something that was highlighting the guys that came up with this. And the whole time I'm reading, I'm going, yeah, but July, guys? July? In Dallas?
Doing.
Being a band nerd, I remember sitting down waiting while one section was practicing. And I literally put my hand on the concrete and said, we probably should go get an egg and see if we could fry an egg. And then when I heard the story of what happened during the Dallas Grand Prix, I thought, I wasn't too far off.
Yeah. No shocker there at all.
Yeah. So I guess I do in many ways agree that there is a misunderstanding, and the sentiment you're highlighting about people feeling like when the money dries up, because I wondered about other people's perceptions of the way the Las Vegas Grand Prix even was inaugurated last year. It seemed outside of what actually happened during the race weekend. And of course, everyone wants to say it was a success. And I want to believe that in many ways that it was. It just depends on how you define success. And then this year, it seems like there were some better elements of it. I think lessons were learned. And the guys have reminded me over and over that the first time a Grand Prix happens, it generally is a bit of a challenge. It's really the third year that you tend to see whether or not it's going to be. You get that sustainability question starts to be answered or not. I wondered what your thoughts were on the fact that we have 3 races. And when you think about the market and accessibility, do you think that it's really necessary? And, of course, people are talking about there's going to be one in New York and there's going to be one in Chicago. Who's sitting there going, well, that's great. But if I can't afford to go to any of those places, I don't know that you're making yourselves beloved in any of those cities if what Las Vegas residents are telling us how they feel about it. And I was in Las Vegas right before the Grand Prix and talked to people. And depending on what they do determines whether or not they like it, or where they live in proximity to the Strip determines whether or not they like the race coming. And then talking to people who were in the government there and officials, they highlighted the fact that this was a dead weekend basically for them. So it's worth the financials to take the gamble and see if it will be adding to that was not a pun intended.
That was a really good one though.
But it seemed like they saw it as worth attempting it, especially when they want to be branded not only as the entertainment capital of the world, but even more, they want to be branded as the sports and entertainment capital of the world. So very long wind up, but I wonder what your thoughts are about the number of races that we have in the United States or projected to add more.
So I don't disagree with there being 3 because I think there is enough interest to justify those 3, but I do disagree with the pricing of those 3. Even COTA has skyrocketed in price as of late. Miami, too many dollar. Las Vegas, same problem. If you've got 3 races, you want people to go to them. And if they can't go to them, you're not actually why would you have this race here in the United States? Why wouldn't you just put that anywhere else in the world? It doesn't matter where you've put it. The paddock is the same, whether you're in Austin or if you're in, Miami or in Vegas, even in Austria, it's the same people, the same stuff, the same atmosphere of motorsport. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the people in that region are walking in through the gates, spending their money, watching the sport, getting involved. And we're just not quite there in the US. The tickets are too expensive. That's the biggest thing. I think Vegas has a special quality to it because you don't have to have a ticket to enjoy the atmosphere of the event. The first year I had several friends who just showed up in town. I walked outside and I heard race cars. I took an escalator and I saw one. But I'm here because I can go to the activations that the teams have. I can go to, Lewis Hamilton's Almav alcoholist tequila bar. I can go, there was a screening of Ferrari. I can go watch a race car movie before anyone else can see it. These are things that that's attainable, and that's the culture I think that people want to engage in and have meaningful interaction with the sport. Formula One isn't doing that in a capacity where it's ticketed, So I think like that's the disconnect that I'm seeing. If we have any more races, I don't know what we're doing with any of that. That's too many. I think honestly we could do with just 2 in the United States. I've not been impressed with Miami. I think it's just fine. And I understand, they really want Vegas to work because they've always wanted Vegas to work. Because who wouldn't want to race cars down the strip? That is a stunning visual. It is a super cool, like, it's just a cool thing to say that you're able to do. I think it's just this constant disconnect that I keep seeing that I feel where, like, you show up to the race in Austin and I'm like, okay, we've done the cowboy theme. Like, we've done it every single year. Texas is so much more than just the cowboys, especially if you're in Austin, which is a music city, a mecca for culture. You could draw on that. That would feel more kind of in line with what you're doing. I think similarly in Miami, how many more times can we do the Miami Vice theme? I think we're going to keep seeing it. Like, do we is that doing anything? There's so much more to Miami than, what they're projecting as this kind of stereotypical engagement with the sport. I think we're at peak capacity. If we had a single other race, if they put a race in New York City, I might explode. Just trying to see what they do for the marketing of it in and of itself, let alone what the ticket prices are going to be. It feels like a lot of the US races now have become a place to be seen, not a place to see race cars. The celebrity aspect will always be part of Formula One. It always has been. But the fans are the ones who keep the sport growing, that, you're not going to have a race if no one's showing up to watch the race. And if you just have like 6 VIPs, that's no fun. That looks bad on TV, especially because we have Liberty Media. I wish we had such more authentic engagement here. We're so close to getting it, and we're not there yet, but we're so close.
I like what you're saying. I think, if anything, when you talk about the celebrity aspect, I agree, but then I also kind of disagree in the sense that you have the celebrities that have been in the sport, but not to the level and like preeminence it almost feels like we have today. And I wonder how much of that is because of the social media influencer culture, as much as the sport has sought to harness that and break out of, as you said, the Ecclestone lockdown era, and also accelerate its own financial growth, has been through that, the utilization of influencers. Because like when we were talking last year headed to Las Vegas and we found out how expensive it was, and then I started seeing all these people on YouTube, I'm like, how in the world, you got a ticket to go so they could get your audience there, and then these people are talking about Formula One, and I'm going, yeah, it's very superficial. I don't even know that you fully understood. You just were really excited to get to go and see cars go fast, which Formula One is that at its most basic level, but that is that. It's its basic level. And I couldn't agree with you more about ad nauseum cowboy hats when it comes to Coda.
So I'm so over it. I can't do it again.
I know. I'm like, yeah, I just made it sound because like it's a painful thing. I feel like I literally said that when I saw them start the races, the race weekend this year. I went, "Are you serious? Cowboy hats again?" Yeah. The Miami Vice I really hadn't thought about, but I think it's going to have to end soon because the generation that actually experienced Miami Vice,
the nostalgia culture is so big. We don't know Miami Vice, but we know the Miami Vice aesthetic now.
I guess
that's it. I mean, we don't know cowboys. None of us are cowboys, but we know what the hats and the boots look like.
That's true. Yeah, you don't see this kind of behavior when it comes to marketing things like the Dutch Grand Prix or Spa. It feels very racer culture there. And I didn't really think about it until you highlighted the distinction of how it's being marketed to us here in the United States and a misunderstanding of who we are. And I'm a major proponent of the way you treat a person and your expectations of that person. Most people want to meet that or exceed that. So if you put on like, oh, well, y'all are just a bunch of cowboys, well, then that's what people are going to think. You think I'm just a American yokel, and that's not what I am, And so you've given me a lot of thought and reinforced some of my thinking that I'm maybe not as far off base as what my perceptions are. So then let me ask you this question then. It kind of goes about the business of Formula One itself. itself, do you think that these changes that you even are advocating for, or your perceptions, do you think any of that will possibly be implemented because we're seeing changes inside of Liberty Media and Formula One itself?
It's so tough to say because I feel like if there's one thing looking at big business has taught me, it's that none of it makes any sense. And everyone who is in that sphere thinks they know everything a lot better than we do. I think we're several years into the Liberty Media era at this point, and we've continued to carry out at least some of the same themes in terms of how we've marketed races. We've kind of brought it up to 11 in certain ways as well. I think particularly with Las Vegas, that is Formula One's foray into management of a race and organization of a race. It's never done that before, but it said, Las Vegas, we're going to show you what we've got. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with what they've shown us and the way, like, yes, they learned a little bit between the 2 years that they've had it, but I don't feel like they learned enough. When I'm in Vegas to cover the race, the thing I love to do more than anything is talk to my Uber drivers. They're the people who are going to be impacted the most, annoyed the most, and probably have the most kind of down-to-earth thoughts on it. And there was one woman that I was riding with this year who was like, I get what they're doing and I understand and appreciate that they heard some of our feedback and tried to change, but I can't access this thing. I can't take my son. I don't care about race cars, but I want, I would love my son to see this thing that we have in our city that is unique to us. Wouldn't that be something special? Like, even if they just did, you can come out for free practice one, we've got the local ticket that's $5 or free or whatever, and you let the people around you kind of understand, oh, this is the thing that's taking over my city. Maybe they would understand it more. Maybe they would be interested. Maybe they would want to understand what this thing is, as opposed to just seeing it as a nuisance. I think we've got a very similar sentiment within the US sphere, just in terms of the way that Formula One seems to think about Americans. As much as I would love to say that I think things would change, I just think we're still being seen as like kind of the big money investment. You can cash all your chips in on us because we're going to pay out because we're Americans and we, I don't know, have a lot of money to throw around, I guess, which I don't think we do, but that's what we seem to thing. And I think that's part of that disconnect as well between different classes. The people who are watching the Formula One races are not the people who are making the decisions about Formula One. The guys who are up in charge have a lot more money than I ever will dream of having. They are thinking about things and sponsorships and activations that will not ever impact me, will have nothing to do with anything I care about. I think one of the big things you can point to this year is the LVMH partnership that Formula One has. That's big for Formula One. For me as a fan, that's nothing. I don't have anything to do. I'm never going to drop that much money on any of those collaborations that they have. I'm not a fashion person, so I'm never going to notice, oh, we've got a driver in Louis Vuitton this weekend. That's so far outside of my sphere of existence that I just don't understand it. But those are kind of indicative class markers for a certain subset of people who have a whole lot of money and find value in showing that in ways that other people who have money also see it and go, hey, you're one of us. I know when I go into a paddock, I don't fit in. One of my big takeaways from the first year in Miami, and the thing I wrote about was I grew up as a poor kid. I showed up here in my outfit that I thought was cute, my little dress from Target. I realized how almost everyone around me was not in that same boat. I'm looking at people, I'm like, their nails cost more than my life. Their handbag is, something that I wish I could, I wish I had $5,000 to just spend on a thing. I think that's kind of where Formula One lies, where they're in that sphere where it's they don't really see that. They're not talking to the fans who are actually at the track. They're in their bubble. I think it's very difficult for anyone to kind of penetrate it. It's a very common sense thing for us Americans for them to tell them, but to them it makes no sense at all because they don't have that kind of communication with the littler people or the people who are building the fan base. I think fans are kind of seen as expendable resources. If the American fans are no longer here, then maybe we go to South America and we get the Franco Colapinto fans involved and we have a new market that we go and try to take on. You're looking for the place to go that will make the biggest bang for their buck, I think, as opposed to making a meaningful investment in the fan base that exists in those places.
I can see your perspective. I think it's the the tension between the racing enthusiast and the marketing aspect and the business of Formula One. And they both need each other. And it's a question of which gets sometimes priority, which one overtakes. Like when the imbalance is there is then when you have the challenge the greatest, right? Because you need good racing, and racing culture tends to be a very grassroots type of movement, right? And then, but marketing,
and I think especially,
business,
not to cut you off, I'm sorry.
no,
But
no
like,
problem.
especially here in the United States, where our racing inherently is a lot less expensive than Formula One.
Right.
You know, NASCAR, it's stock cars. It's more expensive now because they're not stock anymore, but they are a more affordable type of car. You know, when the drag racing scene that evolved in America is, you know, that's just your car that you did something to and maybe made it go faster. IndyCar, we keep that thing on a cost cap lockdown because IndyCar shot itself in the foot so many times it doesn't know what to do with itself. We have a totally different way of relating to this. We see racing and we go, we should be able to go to that. This shouldn't be a thing you have to like scrimp and save and plan an extravagant vacation for. For us, this is like, you know, if I want to go to see a race just for racing, I can go to any IndyCar race for a hell of a lot cheaper. You know, it'll be a different experience. But if we want the racing, that's where you go. If you want the experience of Formula One, go to Formula One.
Yeah, agree with that. When you were talking, I thought of two different things. One is when you said about like the local person in Vegas and letting them have access or something that gives them some buy-in. Maybe think of the history of the sport, like when it was the Grand Prix racing, right before it was Formula One. It was the town, it was the people. Everyone came in and like paid attention to that race.
I mean, it was the national pride of the fact that this manufacturer represented your country to a victory.
Right.
There was a lot more, I think, at stake, where you had more of a personal connection, where we don't have that quite as much anymore.
And then you have the era where it does become more glitzy. And I think I said earlier when you started talking about the celebrity aspect of it, when I said I kind of disagree. I think I said spa. I don't think of it as a celebrity culture. When I think of celebrity and Formula One, immediately it's Monaco and the glitterati and the era of like, again, James Hunt and all of them, right? All those cool people. But when I think of Suzuka, I don't think of celebrities there. It feels like there are different elements in the course of Formula One history where these different aspects are there. But never have we had a time where we've asked it all to converge at the same time and resonate here in the United States and resonate with our European fan base, and then in the Asian markets, and in the South American. Like, it's kind of perked up at different places at different times over the course of the history. And so then I guess it may sound like I'm kind of defending liberty, but I guess where I'm coming at is that if they bought a product, they're trying to figure it out, and as you said earlier, a plateau, and now maybe hopefully they'll start to do those tweaks, and maybe fan response will give them that desire to change because it is a market. And if your market isn't engaging, then any good business starts to go, okay, where are the wheels coming off? And if you've ever read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, good businesses seeking to become great do have those introspective moments of let's figure out what it is that needs to happen of keeping that flywheel going. And do we have the right people on the bus? So I want to believe like maybe that's being too positive, and that's unusual for me because I'm usually the negative Nelly in a group. But I want to believe that you've only got year 2 of Vegas. COTA still brings in a lot of value. I'm with you. I've not been super excited by Miami, and I'm the girl who gets up at 2 a.m. I think you are too, and watches whatever free practice is happening. And even if that means I'm laying in bed and I'm just listening to it and like half eyes open.
It's in my dreams.
Yeah, it's right. It is. There have been a couple of times where I've actually dreamt that I was in the race, but you know, that's a person like me. And I wonder if they realize for the health of the business, you've got to figure out a way to balance both the elites that have been a part and give that experience, glamour, target that everyone wants, but you can't sustain this without the racing community.
I come from like the big media conglomerate background where like I've worked for so many failing companies that don't seem to realize that they're failing. And they're just like busy navel gazing. So I think I am coming to from it from like a very negative perspective on that front. I hope like there is some middle ground because I love what you're saying kind of about the celebrities and influencers because you are absolutely correct. There has never been a time when the eyes are on us, you know, as a individual person, even me as a person who's not a celebrity, people are paying attention to me more than they ever would have in the past. I think the big thing with Formula One is figuring out how to bridge that gap between like the celebrity influencer. How do you get the people who come in that way to become fans? I think one of the big talking points after Vegas was the amount of influencers at the track who didn't seem to do anything meaningful. You know, you've got someone who's posing with a car and it's like, okay, sure, I guess that's good because maybe someone who didn't know what Formula One was has learned about it today. But what did you give them to say, watch the race? What did you give them to say, find out what this is beyond maybe a Google search, engage with this thing? That's a really difficult gap to bridge. I don't envy them for that. I think about this all the time, even in my own work of like, how do you explain a nuanced concept like aerodynamics in Formula One to someone who doesn't have the context of this? How do you explain why the air matters so dang much and why this little flap on the wing was different last weekend has such an impact?
Well, and you also have to put it in its context of the setup and how this track is different than the previous track. And I would say I did love, and I don't know why they stopped it. I don't know where he went, but for me, one of the tools that was so helpful was Albert Fabergé's series that he would do with Rosanna Tennant. And like, I'm huge fans of both of them, where each week they would pull something technical off the car. And I think when I read the notes on YouTube, everyone was like, by the end of the season, Albert's going to have a miniature race car in front of us because he would pull like the plank or he would pull the tire or the wings, and it's all mini. And I also was like, he must be traveling around the globe with this stuff. And he said he put it in his bags. And I'm like, yeah, you're sitting there going, thank you, because you're helping to make it. And he did, his style was great. His accent didn't hurt. Like, it just made it cool. And then Rosanna sat in the seat, I think, of most people of like, wait, what? What is this? And I think those are things that are necessary, which is part of the reason why we started this podcast was, okay, Dick will do a tech conversation. And we did. We talked about Aero 101 and I'm asking all these questions. And of course, we're just an audio. But I think that the sport definitely needs to create more ramps for a beginner to come in. I personally, like you, it sounds like, had to go in and do my own research. And I loved that there were content creators who were passionate about the sport that created a lot of options for me to read and learn. Say, hey, go read this book. Those were things that or videos that they put together, the time that they put in. And I think that that's where, even if the sport continues to encourage that, I would have loved that the top Formula One based YouTubers or podcasters, content creators, those are the ones that even this last year got invited to come and say, hey, I may not be, I don't know, Mr. Beast and don't have millions of viewers, but I'm a person who's already proven a passion for the sport. And it would be mutually beneficial, I think. That's not me trying to plug that we should get tickets to go to Las Vegas. I mean, I wouldn't turn those down, but I just think that would be one of the solutions to the problem that you're posing. The other, I would say, is that you mentioned it of how people got really annoyed, I guess, or put off by last season and Max's dominance. And I was concerned that people weren't seeing everything else that was happening on the rest of the field because they were like, oh, he's gone. He's done. Why do I and then turning it off? I'm like, you got to watch the rest of the field. And
there's other stuff going on.
There's totally right. There was so much stuff happening. And that if you were watching last season, you could understand what we started to see in 24 because 23 gave you some inklings if you knew what to look for. And that's one of the conversation points the guys and I have. And this is where I have a little bit of hope in Formula One is that I noticed when we turned to 24 and early Max dominance, they weren't just sitting the camera on Max the whole race. They started to show us stuff happening on the other parts of the field and not just having the commentators kind of throw them in at the last second. Oh, Gasly did this. So maybe the feedback we're giving is helping because I know I do the fan feedback stuff that they offer. Like, I take my time and I write long things because I'm like, well, if you're asking, here you go. I'll tell you what. what I think, and I'll be consistent about it.
I really like what you're saying about this season, particularly connecting to last season. I think Formula One struggles to kind of communicate at large. You're watching, like, yes, each season is kind of its own little condensed mini event. But if you look at it, it's like, when did you start to see the Red Bulls fall off? It was 2023. It was in Spain. They brought an upgrade and it didn't work and it was bad, particularly for Checo. And that kept spiraling. And you could see kind of where that went. You know, we had the same thing even within this season. When did McLaren get good? They brought a great Miami upgrade. Suddenly we saw something completely different and change. I think we need to like tie that back a little bit more and be like, remember last year, Haas was real bad. And here's what happened in that interim period. Here's why they're a little bit better. Here's why they're fighting for a midfield position as opposed to being dead last. Those things kind of, I think it amplifies the storyline, even if it's, you know, for the dedicated fan. I love a good reminder. I love to reminisce. Just tell me what's going on. You know, I don't mind. Maybe you've made me think about something I didn't think about before.
It's almost like the storytelling aspect of it needs to be reviewed. Like thinking of it as a TV show, not like Drive to Survive and narrative created, but almost like a retrospective TV show that says, hey, let's look at the way as one story peaks, then another one's probably going to start coming in slowly, and you have to weave it in. And I think you probably see it from your perspective more than anybody of, oh wow, these are moments in the sun for this element and now this, and it'd be good if we kind of kept that all cataloged in our brain.
I wish we had more kind of that.
I was going to ask you, when you brought it up earlier, the 11th team, you sounded really excited by Cadillac. So tell me, what do you think about the twists and turns of the saga? Like, what are your insights into that whole?
The whole Cadillac fiasco has aged me considerably. I want an 11th team. I think Formula One will benefit from it. I think it is kind of stupid to keep it limited to 10. I understand the exclusivity argument and the financial argument, but if I hear Ferrari complain about not getting a good, slice of the pie again when they get legacy payments for just being around forever, I might snap. I think the thing with Cadillac, it is a shame that Andretti is not involved, but also I understand that the Andretti name came with, I don't know what the heck went on with Michael Andretti and everyone in Formula One, but they just do not seem to enjoy that man. That happens. That's fine. But Cadillac has a big investment in going global. I joined them this year at Le Mans. They invited me out for the 24-hour race, and we started that week by going to their Paris dealership that they had just opened across from the Opera House in this area that gets millions and millions of people walking by in foot traffic. They're seeing suddenly, oh, Cadillac has this big multi-floor dealership in this beautiful old facility. It's gorgeous. It's Cadillac. That's an American company that has kind of tried to branch out, but has never done it with this kind of this focus and intention. So I think the thing that I'm most excited for is just seeing it is a big investment. Haas came in and that was exciting because it was American, but it always felt smaller because it was Gene Haas. It was, a guy who hopped in and a guy who had money. We're talking about a corporation, one that has billions of dollars, one that has an investment to sell cars across the world, that wants to grow, that wants to evolve. I think we're going to see them attempt to be competitive right out of the gate, because otherwise, what are they doing? It's exciting because you think at it and it's like we've had some American manufacturers previously in the sport, but they were all very kind of more independent. You had Penske, you had Dan Gurney, you had guys doing these things, but we've never had our own Ferrari. We've never had our own Mercedes. We're getting that now. And I think that's the exciting part, is it puts us on this level playing field with the big dogs. So suddenly America is not just eyes. It is an active participant in this sport. We have a team. We hopefully have an American driver, and in the next few years, we're going to have an engine, and people are going to buy that engine because they think it's good. And we will become kind of deeply ingrained within the sport in a level of importance that we just have not had previously.
I'm really intrigued by the fact that you were able to visit the Cadillac dealership. I wonder what your thoughts are, because I've heard this commentary is these large manufacturers come in, think that they can just come into Formula One and figure it all out. Developing a road car is very very different to creating a formula car. And if we've seen this over and over, that they misperceive the level of challenge that this will be. What would you answer to that?
I think the thing, like, if you are not watching the World Endurance Championship and if you're not watching IMSA, you're doing yourself a disservice, because you will see there how well Cadillac has done in creating a hybrid prototype that is competitive, that is going head to head against the likes of Ferrari already. We're seeing this incredible improvement in the competitive aspect. Take a second to like dig into it, because then you realize, oh, they have an investment in a racing program already. They've put the big bucks in. Obviously, a hypercar is totally different to a Formula One car, but they have kind of similar base elements of purpose-built racing machine with a hybrid engine. We've at least got those building blocks. We've shown that Cadillac is fast. They didn't win Le Mans this year, but they were really dang good. You know, we had a hugely competitive prototype field, so it was hard to say, like, they did bad. They were as good as everyone else. There's just so many good competitors this year that what are you going to do? You can't dominate everything. Everyone was on a similar playing field of, you know, we're still, that technology for the hypercar is new. I do think that there will be a growing period, obviously. You're never going to hop into a discipline and have it mastered, but we've seen, like, Cadillac, they already have a prototype car built. They already wind tunnel testing, and because they are not in Formula One, they have access to unlimited testing, unlimited dollars for development. They can spend that up front, and the company has a lot of money to do it. And I feel like they're not just kind of going in, like they're full in. They're 100%, and they're going to spend the money. They're going to spend the time. They're going to get the minds on this, need to be on this program for it to succeed. Just hearing some of the, you know, I can't necessarily share them, but some of the appointments that I've heard within the technical program on the strategy side have been deeply impressive to me. Keep your eyes out for those. You know, I think we're building up to an incredible program that is coming with a lot more forethought than I think people are expecting, because they heard the Andretti mess and they kind of hyper-focused on the interpersonal dramas and the spats. And what does Andretti matter? Cadillac matters. They've got the money. They've got the opportunities. They're doing this. They are not gonna just like 50% it, dip a toe and see what happens. They're committing to a long future, and I think that's a good sign. I don't think they're coming in to dominate. I think they're coming in to compete really well and then see what they can do with that.
Well, you make a very good case. I'm really impressed by it. I've been consistently impressed by your analysis, and I think that you made a very wise points there that I think distinguishes some of the predecessors. Like, it sounds like your perspective is that they have learned the lessons from others that have sought to do this, and that this was a very thought out decision, which also explains the kind of seemingly turnabout in the Formula One space, why they would say, okay, we're going to go ahead and let this pass through.
Yeah, Formula One wanted Cadillac. They didn't want Andretti. They wanted Cadillac because they knew Cadillac was committed and they knew Cadillac was going to dump that money in. They knew General Motors wasn't messing around. You can have your thoughts and perspectives about where Andretti ties into all of that and what they would have done if they had been in charge. But Formula One sees value in this. And for as much as I can question some of Formula One's decisions, I do think they know what they're doing when it comes to, at the very least, letting in a manufacturer who is going to split their price fund. They're not going to take that lightly.
I agree with you on that. I'm glad you did give a plug for IMSA and for endurance. And those are things that we also think are good for any fan of Formula One to learn the other disciplines. And I'm personally been paying attention a little bit more to rally racing, largely because I watched Carlos Sainz Sr. do his Dakar, and I was like, that guy is amazing. I'm so impressed by Carlos Sr. And I wanted to, and then when I started Googling it and looking on YouTube, and I saw some of the races, and I went, that's insane. That's so cool.
Yeah.
It's insanity. And I want to see more of that, you know, kind of thing. So I love that.
Absolutely. I was going to say, we went to the Baja 1000 for the first time this year and had a similar, like, mind-boggling, like, we just let people do this? They just get to go barreling through the desert at high speeds. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. If you're like, oh, Formula One, I have complaints or like nitpicks, I guarantee you your craving will be solved somewhere else. You will learn so much more about what motorsport is as a conceptual, historic whole, and you're going to come back to Formula One and be like, this is cool because of its own unique reasons. Watching IndyCar, watching NASCAR, watching IMSA or WEC, that's not to, you don't have to ever replace Formula One if you love it. But I've always found that it's like, oh, this gives me so much more context for what's going on in Formula One. I get it. It's different, but it's this, it's motorsport at the end of the day. I'm just such a nerd for it. It's not enough hours in the day.
I know. I was looking at the clock and I was thinking, okay, we'll have to put the rest of my long list of questions into a part 2 conversation if you're willing, Elizabeth.
Please.
And hopefully the guys will be able to join us in that conversation. Yeah, that would be awesome because I do think that we are just two nerds. Like, I feel like we're two pieces.
I was going to say, it's like looking in the mirror.
That's so great. Well, our audience can't see, but like every time you're talking, I'm like nodding my head vigorously, going, yes, 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 that's right. I agree with you. And you're challenging my thinking, and we can also have differences of opinion and be civil and kind to one another. And that's probably something we could talk about in the future is just the level of discord that I see, especially our social media space of Formula One is very discouraging sometimes if you were in that space and have like for us, like managing that, we've all talked about like how hard that is of watching, and we just don't want to contribute to that. We want to be positive. My personal view, and I think the guys would agree, is I root for every single driver and every single team. There may be just a couple that I root a little bit more for, but I'm never going to be like, oh, they're terrible, they're awful, that's just, it doesn't make sense to me. It's counter to who I am as a human being, and I'm not the one doing it. So it's very easy to sit behind a keyboard and have very negative commentary, but go out there and do it, then come back and talk to me if you want to say that kind of nonsense, in my opinion. So on that note,
I mean, I've always had my grudge against Max Verstappen because he replaced Jean-Eric Verne, but that was like, I recognize that was my own personal spat. That was my own, like, this is my holdup. I know he's a really good driver. I can see that he's progressing. I understand that, but I'm still mad my guy's gone.
oh, that's a really magnanimous of you to say, I can see that. We'll see who replaces Max. I mean, that's the thing. It goes back to what you talked about, like the rise and the fall, the rise and then the new rise, I guess. So this will be our last question because we could talk forever, is career longevity. We're seeing that in like Alonso and Lewis, I think are the most obvious, but there are others who have had to say goodbye to the grid. And do you think that they could ever come back? Do you think that you'll see them in other disciplines, kind of going back to what we said about the wisdom to watch other series? What are your thoughts about that?
This is such a good question because I think, when you watch a sport, you get very attached to the people who are involved in that sport. I know a lot of Daniel Ricciardo fans are disheartened. I was of the opinion that, like, fresh talent maybe is a good situation here, but I was still very disappointed by the way that they, V-Carb handled that whole situation, and the way that Daniel just didn't get a chance to say goodbye or have a last race that he was aware of being his last race. I think, you can kind of, I think, tell when a driver has exceeded his goodwill. Daniel Ricciardo has done so, and I don't say that as a sense of like he did something incorrect or wrong. I think it's just him and the sport are both disillusioned with each other right now. And so he's stepped back. Similar with Mick Schumacher. Mick really wants to be in Formula One, but there is something there that is keeping that boy back from it. Zhou Guanyu this year, he's leaving. I'd love to see him back. He really grew on me all season long. But in his interviews at the end of the season, he was like, I'm actually very grateful that I have 2025 off because my headspace is so messed up right now. I'm so stressed. I'm so exhausted. You get disillusioned, I think, with it. I am glad we've seen good, fresh talent. It is kind of unnatural in Formula One to not have a rookie. And as we saw this, heading into 2023 to 2024, was the first time almost 75 years of Formula One's long history that there was not a new rookie on the grid. There was not one different guy starting the first race of 2024 compared to the last race of 2023. We've seen people get their good chances. I was stoked on Franco Colapinto. I thought, he was a nice guy and he was quick when he got in the car. I loved seeing Oliver Behrman. I loved seeing Liam Lawson kind of get his second shot. I'm excited to see what Kimi Antonelli can do. It's tough because it seems like Formula One moves in cycles. And so you get a lot of really good talent who comes and is ready for Formula One, and no one's ready to retire yet, and no one's ready to leave. And so it's like, oh, well, you had people like Teo Porcher and Colin Eilot came up through the ranks in the Formula ladder and was like, oh, Formula One's just never going to happen for us. But then you've got these other guys, like especially coming into next year, we have so many rookies. They're just like throwing them at the grid because we have so many people who are stepping back, people who are retiring of choice, being retired of not their choice, but being, told to step back. I'm always in two minds of it because on the one hand, I want to see what they can do. I like them. I've grown on them. You've interviewed them. You've gotten to know these fellas. At the same time, I'm also, how cool is it going to be to see the next young star and to be there for his first race, to talk to him in his rookie season. You never know when these people are going to come. You never know when the next Max Verstappen is going to show up, when the next Lewis Hamilton will be here, when the next Michael Schumacher is going to arrive. You just have to be there and hope that you are in the right place at the right time. And it's neat to see kind of that turnover. It is bittersweet because I do like Kevin Magnussen. I love Valtteri Bottas. I love Daniel Ricciardo. I love Zhou Guanyu. I'm losing a lot of my sons, but I'm sure next year I will gain some new ones.
Well, especially with Zhou, when you talked about the decision of young racers to leave their homes and come to Europe. Zhou was 13 when he made that decision, and you see how many doors he's opened for others to dream that they could be that person. And you would love for it not to end. Well, I'm glad he got points at the end of the 2024 season. That felt very just, but you would also like it to be that he could continue to go further because of all the sacrifice that he had done. And especially, I don't know when this is going to air, but just today or earlier today, Valtteri Bottas had done an interview where he highlighted how the transition to Sauber was one thing versus what he ended up having reality. And if he was that vocal, you have to wonder what that was like for someone like Zhou, who isn't as senior, hasn't had the opportunity to prove as much as Valtteri has. Nobody questions if Valtteri knows how to drive a car or win races. You don't all of a sudden forget how to do that, right? I feel like that's a statement that Dick would make. But then everyone is questioning Zhou because he was rising. But you have to really ask if both of them are struggling with that car. That's what I kept hoping all year long. People, it's not the drivers right now. As much as I respect the team and the people who are there, the mechanics and the engineers and everybody doing their job, but I think there's something going on that we are unfortunately not privy to that is holding them back from being able to do the job that I think that they're all wanting to do. It's clear. I don't think any one of those people goes there going, oh, I want to be at the back of the grid. Nobody does that. They're all putting in their heart, but somehow the synergy is not working or the leadership is not doing what they need to be doing. I don't know.
I think in Qatar, when Zhou scored points, I'm pretty sure that was the first time that season he ran the same package as Valtteri Bottas on the car. They always had him a step behind. At the end of the season, they gave him it's like, oh, well, we have the parts. We can do this for you now. And then, as you can tell, he went out and scored points. He wasn't the senior driver, so he didn't have sway. But I will say, his manager is Graham Loudon, and Graham Loudon was just signed as team principal of Cadillac F1, so perhaps we will see Zhou Guanyu return in the future. I hope so. He really did grow on me. It's hard not to appreciate what these drivers do when you see what the sacrifices they have had to make, and especially with Zhou Guanyu, learning an entirely different language, moving to an entirely different continent. That's crazy, and I have a lot of respect for it. And it just feels like he kind of did get the short end of the stick.
Well, when you talk about the language, I don't know if I was listening to somebody talk about this or I read it, but highlighting just the communication style, the culture differentials that, especially when you're not coming from the West. I have family that came here to the United States, and I watched the translation element. And here we're talking the high stakes of Formula One racing. You're working with English as not your first language, and you're still excelling. Those are the things that, again, why I respect these guys so much, and these teams and people who are putting in their heart into this. But again, we could keep going for another 2 hours, so we will shut this down today, and we will do a part 2 hopefully at some point over this next season. You can maybe even, if you're at a race, we would love for you to send us info and hey, I'm here. We have a few friends that do that or at the races. They'll send us videos and stuff like that. Yeah, we've loved that. So anything you're willing to share with us, I know our audience would be happy to have the opportunity. And we'll link your Planet F1 page your profile so people can follow you. And then and of course, we will be in touch.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today. We had a great conversation.
Thank you. Okay, friends, what did you think of our conversation? Drop me a line via email, sabrina@2guysagirlandf1.com. Can you help us out? If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us and give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, as well as share this episode with other F1 fans. We know our growth is because of you, and the guys and I thank you. And with that, let me say, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in, because we're just 2 guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.